right, welcome to this edition of Titan Leader Talks. I'm here with Coach Skinner, the head volleyball coach at the University of Kentucky. Thanks for joining us, Coach.
Oh, great to be here. Glad we could do it.
Yep. So this week on Titan, our big emphasis is going to be communication. So we have some specific topics that Coach Skinner is going to discuss with us. But before that, Coach, could you just kind of share your journey on how you reached where you are today?
Well, it's, I think you alluded earlier, was it big into a lot of sports growing up and football, golf, baseball, all of it. And then started playing a little club volleyball. Luckily grew up in Muncie, Indiana, where Ball State was, and the varsity coach, their son and I were the same age. We started playing volleyball in 6th grade, which I really didn't even know what volleyball was until he asked me to play. But kind of fast forward, I eventually went to Michigan initially and then transferred to Ball State to play varsity on the team there and started coaching high school and club. And my first college job was restricted earnings coach, making a whopping $12,000 at Wisconsin back in 1994, and was there for 3 years. Quit coaching, actually. I got a degree in accounting and thought I wanted to go in the business world. Really missed it, missed competing, missed teaching. And then went back. The guy who was my assistant coach in college asked me to come join him when he got the head coach at Ball State. And so I was with him for about a year and a half. And because there's just not a ton of head coaching opportunities on the men's side, I was able to get back on the women's side at Nebraska. John Cook was the head coach there, who was also at Wisconsin, and joined him for 5 years and had a great run there, national championship and several Big 12 championships while they were in the Big 12. And luckily got the head job at Kentucky in 2005, and my wife and I thought we'd evaluate every 5 years, and here we are 15 years later and still going and love it, and had some success, and so kind of a short version of my journey, but loved every minute of it.
All right, let's jump into this idea of communication. I think one of the big challenges today is the idea of effectively communicating with our players. As they become more and more immersed in technology, and even with the quarantine situation, now we as coaches have to rely more on technology. So how do you as a coach effectively communicate with your team?
Well, it's obviously, it's really important as a coach that they, you can have all this knowledge up here as a coach, but if it's not passed along to your players, it's useless. And so we have to be intentional about communicating several times throughout the year. And I think that, first of all, let's take a year, for example. In the beginning of our preseason in August, they have a championship manual, and it basically has every piece of volleyball information they will need for the whole season and beyond, from team guidelines to expectations, what plays we run, specific play sets, our calendar, anything that we typically, and we can refer to, we'll go into scouting reports. So that's kind of the beginning pages. There'll also be writing assignments we have them do during preseason. Last year our big theme was what is your bigger picture? And so we wanted them to be thinking about what is your bigger picture outside of just being a collegiate athlete. And so we talked a lot about that. And then we have team meetings throughout the year. It could be just, about practice. It could be on the road and before we play a match, and we'll go over scouting reports, but then we'll talk about different things. We'll talk about current events. And throughout the year, we have three sets of individual meetings with our players. We have individual meetings right after preseason to kind of talk about roles and identify what we expect from them individually, now, and then maybe as the season goes along, we have another meeting with them after the season, and then we have another meeting with them at the end of this school year. And so those are pretty important. And during those meetings, there's a couple things that we talk about: roles, we talk about where they are, we'll talk about what we envision for them. And then I emphasize, guys, that, I don't know everything. I want to know what else we can do for you. This is your opportunity. Hey, are we not doing enough for you? What more can we do for you? So I think you have to be vulnerable to your players so that they feel comfortable opening up to you, so to speak. But before those meetings, we have whole person profiles that we do. And so they fill out a questionnaire online. It's through Horizon Performance. And one, they evaluate themselves on, toughness, confidence, coachability, teamwork, several different things. We evaluate them as a staff on where they are from a ranking from 1 to 5. And then their teammates evaluate them also. So they get information about how they view themselves, how the coaches view them in those areas, and then also how their teammates view them. And sometimes it's great feedback and they love every minute of it. And sometimes we have really difficult conversations with them that, hey, you see yourself here, but your teammates may see you in this area. And a lot of ways, but, I try and emphasize, guys, I want you to come to my office. My door is open. Here's some examples of how previous players have come in and talked to us about issues with the team or where we're going or their roles, and try and provide as open a concept as we can. And then we talk about current events. I mean, obviously there's huge current events right now, which I think we'll probably talk about later. And there has been throughout my tenure. And, no topic of conversation is off the boards. But I think being vulnerable as a coach and also showing our players that I want to learn as well is really important, so that they know that we're all in this together. Long-winded answer there, but it's, I'm passionate about communication, and I think it's, a real important quality of consistently successful teams.
So kind of along the lines with that, you mentioned some different things that, you use to communicate. So you have individual meetings, you have that, surveys you do and stuff like that. We always hear about today's athletes have changed, and communication with them has changed. So, you've been at Kentucky for a long time, I believe 2004, is that right? It was your first year. So, you've been there for a while. You've probably seen the change we always hear about. Have you shifted your model for communication? Have you gone more digital? Have you gone more face-to-face to combat the issue? How have you evolved as a coach?
Yeah, it's a really hot topic, and I think has been for the last 5 to 7 or 8 years. I mean, obviously, smartphones have taken over, and I think initially coach's response was, put them down. I don't want to see them. They're occupying your time, and fair, I think. But at the same time, we have to evolve with the times. If you as a coach aren't evolving with the times and continue to learn, then you're doing your players a disservice, because you're asking them to learn and evolve. And, so I think we have to find a balance with that. I think it's really important for face-to-face communication, like the things we just talked about. But I also think it's important we communicate on their level as well. And, think about all the information these guys have at their fingertips, and why shouldn't they take advantage of it? Why can't they ask Siri, what the tallest mountain is in the world, or, who the 23rd president was, or whatever it was. I mean, imagine it would probably take us a day to figure that out when we were their age, and they can figure it out in 30 seconds or less. And so we communicate with them through GroupMe, a messaging, app. We communicate, now, I mean, obviously with COVID, we're on Zooms and doing all that type of stuff, which has completely opened a whole nother set of possibilities. I've met with our seniors on Zoom. We've met with our freshmen on Zoom. We met with our whole team. We've gone small groups. I don't want to do that all the time. Sometimes I ready to throw my computer out the window with how many Zooms we've had over these months. But at the same time, there's so many valuable things we can get out of it. And I think we can learn from our players, so it's definitely an evolution. And, video, I mean, think about all the video that they can watch, and you can say, hey, get on YouTube and watch so-and-so from this pro team and tell me what you think about their line swings or their cross-court kills, and tell me about their posture on serve receive. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can implement communication with their avenues as well.
So, with some of those things that you mentioned, is there anything that you've adopted in the quarantine time period that you've enjoyed or you like or you found effective that you're going to continue to use as we move back to normalcy?
I think so. I mean, I think that, these Zooms can become really valuable. Hey guys, let's this week, let's have 15-minute meetings, individual meetings by position, We don't all have to be in the same room. You know, you guys, someone might be in their dorm, someone might be at home or whatever. We can still connect that way. And I think we should take advantage of it. You know, I think that we had them, you know, watch pro teams. We had them watch teams that were going to play in the fall, and we all met on Zoom and we talked about, you know, what the strengths were of this player, what the things they should work on, how can you implement things in their game into your game, what does, you know, this team do that we're going to play in the fall that we need to prepare for, and had them do a scouting report. You know, so I think there's ways we can incorporate that. We read a book, and I would recommend any coach watching this. There's a book called Why the Best Are the Best by Kevin Eastman. He coached in the NBA for a long time, and it really, you know, us coaches claim we're really smart, but we need to dumb down some. And I think his book really puts in perspective and simplifies things that all of us can have in common knowledge when we're trying to be the best at something. So when we read the book, we'd meet about a chapter each week, and, you know, say over the holidays, you know, we want to get together and meet about an article or a current event or something. We can do it now. And I think it's really opened our eyes that way.
Coach, you know, you're the second person during Titan Leader Talks to recommend that book. And I've actually picked it up and read it myself. And yeah, I mean, there's some great lessons in there, and, you know, it kind of challenges some of the ways that, you know, we traditionally think about greatness or being the best. So, you know, again, I echo that. It's a phenomenal resource, and it doesn't matter what sport you coach. So, you know, you've mentioned you've been a part of national championship. You know, while you're at Kentucky, you guys have had all kinds of success. You've been Elite Eights. You've been in Sweet 16s. You've won the SEC. You know, I think 15 straight tournament appearances, right? Those are all very impressive. So are there any specific ways that you communicate your tradition to the kids? Like ways that you really let them know, hey, this is more than just you on that court?
Yeah, that's, you know, you talk about tradition, and, you know, you're a football coach and you think about, you know, you're at Ohio State, so the Ohio State traditions, and you think about, you know, I started at Michigan, the Michigan football traditions. I know what Kentucky football traditions are, and, you know, we all love those things, and I think traditions are important. And over the course of time, you develop traditions. And, you know, one of our traditions is that we play, you know, a 4-on-4 game at the beginning of practice. It's really competitive, and I think teams, you know, mark on the board, you know, who wins that day. We'd mix up teams. You know, one of our traditions, we play a wiffle ball game in the spring. You know, one of our traditions, we typically go on a trip during preseason just for a day or a night or something. You know, or there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that we have as coach in terms of cornering up before practice, whether I have a lot to say or little to say. We always start practice the same way. You know, a few years ago, we started something, you know, that I stole from Jay Wright at Villanova, basketball coach, that, you know, we play for those that came before us. And, you know, all the people that came before us, you know, last year's team, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so we put a, you know, a mural or a wall thing right outside our locker room. Every day they come out of the locker room, they see the names of every player that played for us. And, you know, not just during my era, but the ones before that. And because this thing is way bigger than me, it's way bigger than our players. And so we need to be humbled by that, and do our, pay our respects to those that laid the foundation for us. And so those are some of the foundations. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining how we communicate about it. I think it's their daily things that we're a part of. And then you look back and realize, I kind of miss that. I kind of miss, you know, doing that or being part of this tradition in our program. So little things that we do.
Yeah, I bet that Alumni Wall is pretty powerful, especially, you know, I think a lot of times people graduate and they get nervous they're going to be forgotten, you know. So that's a great thing that you've put in place where, you know, they come back and, you know, they see their name still on the wall, and you know, that's a great thing, Coach.
Sorry to interrupt. You know, it's funny you said that, because when they come back in the program, they get their picture taken in front of it. You know, the alumni do, and, you know, obviously by their name. And You know, so there's another thing I think that we do in our locker room, and I think a friend of mine does graphics at 49 Degrees, which is up near you in Clearwater. But Brad Stevens in Butler's locker room when he was at Butler had the winning club. And so we have the measurement of, you know, if your class wins over 100 matches in their career, then their whole class gets their name on the board. You know, so obviously your All-Americans get their name on the board, you know, all conference players get their names up. But I think, you know, successful teams have successful players, and the whole roster is responsible for success. And so when a senior class gets to that yardstick, I think it's important that they're recognized for that.
Along the lines of tradition, you know, obviously those things are built upon either core values, core beliefs. Every coach maybe calls them something a little bit different. So when someone enters the UK volleyball program, how do they know what that is? Like, what you guys believe in as a program? How is that communicated to them?
Well, it's certainly in our championship manual, and we have, you know, certain things that we talk about. And, you know, there's 5 principles that I believe in for me as a coach that need to occur. And some of them are kind of core values. Some of them are just, you know, philosophy. And you know, that one of them is that we're community strong. And community strong means that everyone has a voice, that everyone is accepted for who they are, that we are part of a group. And while we may have our differences, we're not divided. You know, that's first important. We can't all be the same, and we're not the same. And obviously with current events of racism and police brutality happening now, it's a really important conversation. The second thing is that I want them to be complete student athletes, and they hear that in the recruiting process, that yes, we're going to try and win at the highest level, but you need to have a complete collegiate experience. The third thing is that I really emphasize this in recruiting and throughout their careers, is that a high volleyball IQ is really important. And if our players can't coach their own team by the time they leave this program, then we have failed as a staff. And so if one kid leaves and we haven't given them enough information or why they're doing things, and they couldn't go coach their own JV team or high school team or club team, then we haven't done our job. And you know, the last thing on that list, and I'll go to another part of it, is love the game. And we all fell in love with the sport we're currently a part of at some point, and that's why we continue to play. And if I ever sense that we're not loving the game, we're not enjoying what we're doing, then I have to figure out why and fix that immediately, because all the other stuff doesn't matter. But to me, and I don't, you know, all along, I've always felt like when I first got in this program, we had half the team that wanted to party and just have a good time and enjoy their social life and live off their scholarship. The other half wanted to be serious about winning. And I had to fix the culture a little bit. And so when we started recruiting, we had positions we needed to be really good at, but every kid that we recruited, their character had to come first. And character trumps talent any day of the week. Obviously, we have to have a baseline of talent we have to recruit. We all know that. And talent makes us all better coaches. But character always trumps that. And, you know, respecting others and always doing what you say you're going to do. And, you know, those things are very valuable things, but those are communicated in the recruiting process, talked about at the beginning of every season, talked about during the season, talked about in the middle of the season, talked about in the spring, and something that we value quite a bit.
So you mentioned, you know, some current topics, and you know, you spoke about it, and you know, speaking of communication, you and your team have amazing Twitter accounts. I know I followed them. You know, I've gotten some good information from there. And, you know, I saw something that the SEC volleyball head coaches put out. It was a statement and everyone signed it. And it was, you know, about the issue of racism in America right now. And so in addition to that statement, you know, how are you guys as a team having open communication or open dialogue about this?
Well, it's really important. You know, I was a football player in high school, and I experienced racism as a player, saw it right next to me, and you know, was disgusted and appalled that, you know, my teammates were being treated like that. And then 30, 40 years later, you're seeing the same thing, and it just angers me. It angers me that we're in this position and we, you know, aren't further along in this issue. And, I am not going to pretend to be the leader in figuring out the solution, but I can have conversation and dialogue with our players. And I think that we met probably 6 or 7 days, maybe 8 days after the George Floyd killing. And it probably wasn't soon enough, but there's no right or wrong answer in terms of communication sometimes, because we all want to try and do what's right. But I think the effort is the most important thing. And even back in 2017, I believe it was, there were similar issues going on, and we had a team meeting about that, brought in a police chief, former police chief, and a current police officer that were friends of mine, talked about an open dialogue, communication. And then, we met on Zoom, a week and a half ago to talk about the same thing. I called every one of our players, African-American players, personally and talked to them. How are you doing? What can I do? Is there anything that I can do to help? And one player, said, hey, I wish that you would have responded earlier. I wish that, your initial post on social media wasn't as ambiguous it was. It's hard to hear, but I was thankful that she felt comfortable enough to share that with me, because I'm not perfect in this. Don't always say the right thing. And so I responded and said, you're right. I need to do a better job. And, and I told our players, I need to do a better job of creating opportunities for Black coaches growing up in our profession to get opportunities to coach at Kentucky. And, we've interviewed coaches, but I don't think I've done enough to create opportunities for others to get in this position. And, you're going to hire the best quality candidate for the job, but I need to create opportunities for everyone to have the chance to coach at Kentucky. And that's part of my responsibility. And the other thing I shared with our players is it's not enough to have a friend that's Black. It's not enough to have a teammate that's Black to say you're not racist. You have to do more, and we have to be part of the change. And we have to hold people accountable when we see people say racist things or, do racist acts. And I think that is part of our responsibility of leading young women. And as a coaching group in the SEC, we felt it was important that we do our best, and we're not going to be perfect, but do our best to help this cause.
Coach, I appreciate that answer. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of times being vulnerable as a coach and, opening up to your players. And, I think that's a perfect example of it right there. I think we're all trying to do better at this, and hopefully, we see that change that's very needed. All right. So final question for you, Coach. This is always my favorite question. We get a lot of positive response from this one. So you, as a college coach, you have seen all kinds of different teams, right? High school teams, club teams, everything in between. So when you see a team, what are the things that stand out to you that you say that is an elite organization or that is an elite program? What are the things that you just see and you're like, I know it?
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. I think that obviously execution. Execution takes a long time to perfect. It takes a lot of practice, skill work, development. You have to have, in our sport, you have to have a couple positions. You have elite level skill, and one is the libero, the other is the setter. And I would assume, like in baseball, it's probably you have to have an elite level shortstop, elite level second baseman, center fielder, catcher, just up the middle to create good execution for the most part. So, good execution in volleyball to me is an art form, and it's beautiful to watch teams that execute at a high level and just looks like art to them. I think when you talk about the connection between players, that elite teams always have eye contact, and when you see eye contact, you see respect, you see interest, you see listening, you see competitive desire, you see a mutual bond that they have together, that they're in this together. They're not just making a play, then putting their head down, turning back to their position. When they're in the huddle, they're looking at each other, they're looking at their coach, they're looking at someone in their own position, or even if someone's, hey, you got to pick it up and do better, there's eye contact. And I think when you don't have eye contact, there's something missing there. There's a lack of respect. There's a lack of effort, lack of love, lack of chemistry. So I think when you see that, obviously they have, are probably pretty successful, but more importantly, they have a lot of respect for each other, and they're willing to give themselves to the group, and not just think about themselves and putting themselves on a pedestal. And I certainly, there's a lot of other things, but I think without that, and that, not saying that's a given either. You got to work at it, and you got to work at respect, and you have to give yourself up for the team. But those are things, and you see a connection on the floor. You see them communicating in between points. They're not quiet, but and the topic of this topic is communication. That before, during, and after the play, there is some form of communication. And bad teams probably have one of those. Good teams probably have two of those. The best teams have all three. They're talking before the point, whistle blows, they're still communicating within the play, whistle ends the play, and they're still talking about the next play, or they're correcting something that happened in the previous play. But that type of communication before, during, and after, eye contact, and effort is, to me, negotiable. So if there's a ball over there and I take 2 steps and stop, you're not on a good team. I mean, you're selling your body for the play. So I don't know if I've answered that in a way that you've heard before or not, but
Coach, that was a great answer, and it did tie directly into communication, so even better. The eye contact, that's an interesting one. We have not heard that answer before, but I can definitely see how that and that's not even like competition. That's just in all things. And I think that's something communication wise, a lot of people knock this current generation because they're so used to, the head down, the downward posture, and, eye contact is, almost like a lost art form for some people. Yeah. All right. Well, twice you have mentioned your players should be able to coach when they leave you. And you've mentioned trying to open up coaching opportunities for, African Americans. So if there is someone watching this and they're younger and they say, man, I want to be an SEC head coach someday, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's really important to have dreams. And, I didn't necessarily have a dream of being a Division I head coach when I first got into it, but it probably evolved over time. I think, first of all, I tell young coaches, we have young coaches come and volunteer for us, or GAs. And one of the things I share with them is like, here's the deal. If you don't enjoy teaching and you don't enjoy relationships or communication with players and helping players get better, then your goal should not be to be a long-term coach. I mean, today's day and age, kids can get jobs in coaching and they can make decent money in college and have a career and all that type of stuff. But if that's the reason you get into it, it's for the wrong reasons. And, I started coaching. I always remember the moment where wow, that was awesome. And I helped a kid. She was able to do something. She got into practice, been working on it, and finally it clicked. And when that moment happened, I was like, oh my God, that's a huge, ding, 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 green light, whatever it was in my mind, that this is, I really enjoy this. And I tried to get away from coaching, but I didn't get that same intrinsic value in banking and accounting that I did in teaching and coaching. So if you love that part of it and you love seeing teams evolve and you love the opportunity to see a team start in one point and end at another point, then that's the first thing. And then it's, hey, let's see, how do we become more successful? How do we recruit better? How do we kind of run our camps to grow the game and, do all those things? And I think the combination of those things, but if you didn't enjoy the daily part of the things that we just talked about, forget about trying to be a head coach, whether it's high school, because, you've been in the seat 17 inches over, and it's a lot different when you get in the seat next to you and you don't realize all the decisions you have to make. And some of them you want to make, some of them you don't want to make. But you have to love the teaching part of it, in my opinion, and then gradually build on that over the course of time. And, I guess it's like a stock investment. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in the game. You have to keep money in and watch it grow over time. And then when you get that opportunity and you feel like it's right, then go for it, and good things can happen. But you have to have that foundation, I think, in the beginning.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. We're glad you didn't pursue that financial background. I think you're impacting way more lives in your current profession. If you enjoyed this, please check out our app or our YouTube channel for other content. Thanks again, Coach Skinner. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's awesome. Appreciate your time. It was a lot of fun.